And this is an opportunity for Kansas to go out, especially if Darryn Peterson is not able to play or is limited. This gives a chance to some of those other guys to go out and take what's there, take what's in front of them, right, against Duke. So it's I think that's probably the way you need to look at it if you're Kansas. Pay heed all who enter. I'm aware of this podcast. That's right. This is a Pay Heed podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, and I'm here with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in Possible, member FDIC. And if you haven't already, you should be doing three things. You should be liking the video on YouTube if you're watching on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel as well. That's so you'll be notified when we go live, which, spoiler alert, we're going to be live tomorrow night, or if you're listening to this on Tuesday morning, Tuesday, we'll be live tonight. Tuesday morning or Tuesday evening is when we'll be live. Immediately following the conclusion of KU's Champions Classic game against Duke, which we're going to be talking a lot about that here on today's show as well. So we'll be live tomorrow night or tonight on Tuesday if you're listening to this in the future. First off, hello, future you. And second off, be sure to subscribe so you can tune in for our live show on Tuesday night after KU and Duke. The third thing you should be doing is sharing a comment and joining on the conversation with us. We love hearing from you guys. If you're on audio, of course, you can absolutely subscribe there as well. Leave us a 5-star rating and review. And we really appreciate your support anywhere you consume our show, whether it's audio, video, whatever it is. We really appreciate you. Thank you to those of you that have continued to help us grow here at KC Sports Network. Really appreciate you. So, as I said, KU and Duke are going to be playing on Tuesday night at Madison Square Garden in the Champions Classic. We'll break that down. We're going to also share some of our thoughts on KU and Princeton over the weekend, which, by the way, if you watched the first half, yikes. Second half was a little better, but we'll dive into that a little bit more as well. A couple of quick notes here off the top before you dive into all of that, though. Number one, KU women's soccer on Friday evening defeated Cal Baptist 3-1. They advanced to the second round of the NCAA tournament. They're going to be playing against Louisville coming up later this week in Durham, North Carolina. Listen, the NCAA needs to standardize its tournament situation because every tournament is different in how it operates. Kansas was the 3 seed. Duke was the 2 seed in sort of their quadrant or their, I guess, region, if you want to call it that. And so as 3 seed, you win one game at home, and then now Duke gets to basically host the next 2 rounds of the tournament. I don't know. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. You have that. You have the baseball, obviously, which is totally different. Then you have, obviously basketball, which makes the most sense, I think. But whatever. You know what? I'm not here to rail against the NCAA. The NCAA has been railed against enough, I'm sure, by many people, myself included in the past.
Never been railed against enough.
Yeah. So KU women's soccer is going to be playing in the NCAA tournament second round later this week. Also, the KU women's basketball team picked up a huge win on Saturday evening after KU men's basketball against Missouri in Kansas City. It was a huge game for Julia Davis, who came back and played very well for Kansas after missing the previous game. They won that one 82-77. So a big early season win for Kansas on the women's side as well. We had a chance to catch up with Elle Evans before that game, but I would highly encourage you, even after the game, I would encourage you to go back and listen to that interview to hear her talk a little bit about herself and her role in the team and where she thinks this team can go. So I would encourage you.
Pretty timely too. She had a nice game too against Missouri.
Yes. So if you haven't, go ahead and check out that interview on our last show as well. We're highly encourage you to do so. All right, let's talk some KU men's basketball here. We'll start with the Princeton game. We'll get into Duke a little bit later in the show, but KU plays Princeton and sort of the final tune-up game before Duke. And obviously, I think the top storyline, Kevin, here is that on Friday, Bill Self comes out and says flat out, hey, Darryn Peterson's not going to play. Great. Okay. Now everybody knows he's not going to play. And so that then sets the table for, all right, you now have another game without him. You know you're going to be without him. And so hopefully, Bill Self kind of alluded to the fact that, like, hey, maybe Kansas wasn't, the team wasn't really fully prepared to be without him for the A&M Corpus Christi game because he was kind of ruled out so late in the day leading up to that game. Yeah. So he would basically had said, hey, okay, now that we know that we're not going to play him in this game, maybe we'll have a little bit better start. And that didn't really happen. Kansas was terrible in the first half, quite frankly, against Princeton. They really struggled both ends of the floor. Princeton was doing their thing. They were shooting threes, and they were leading at various points throughout the first half as Kansas just continued to kind of just fumble around and look like they were searching in the dark for anything as they really struggled in that first half. Second half was obviously a lot better, headlined by Flory Badunga, who ends up with 25 points in the game for Kansas. Kansas basically rode two guys to this win. It was Badunga and then Trey White, who ended up playing well as well. Trey White, by the way, 10 of 13 from the free throw line. He got to the line a lot in this game for Kansas, but Badunga certainly the headliner, 25 points, took along with 10 rebounds. He got a double-double, which was nice to see, and quite frankly, that's the Flory Badunga that I think we expect to see. Maybe not necessarily to that level, but if it's not 25 and 10, maybe it's 16 and 7 or 15 and 8, whatever. But that's sort of the level that you expect him to play at. Obviously, you would hope that with Darryn Peterson back, which we'll talk about that as well, potentially, that you wouldn't be asking Floyd to be your leading scorer, but still, I think that's kind of the level that you hope to see him play at on a night in, night out basis. And Kevin, I know I'm going to toss it to you here. You saw some things from him that maybe you hadn't seen from him as a freshman.
Yeah, with him sizing guys up and taking guys off the dribble, that wasn't something I think he did a whole lot of a year ago. It was something he did in high school. Like you would see him catch the ball sort of in that little elbow area or around the free throw line where he could take a dribble, make a movement, and get to the rim. Wasn't really part of his game a year ago. He was mostly a play finisher a year ago, and that was where he was kind of to start this year too, right, Nick? I mean, when you watched him the first few games, and instead you're seeing him, he spun kind of both ways. He spun and got to the left at one point, spun and finished with his right, which is his offhand at another point. And so, and then you look at the effort that he made to get the offensive rebound when the guy, almost kind of pushed him out of bounds. He grabs the offensive rebound. And then I thought the announcers did a good job of pointing out most big men in that situation where you're grabbing the offensive rebound at 19 feet, they're looking to just pass the ball to a guard. Like, hey, I collected this. Let's restart the offense. Flory instead immediately attacks the rim and gets there and gets 2 points. And so the stuff that he showed just sort of quick off the dribble, and the way that he did that was so positive, Nick, in that a lot of times you have big men that either don't use the dribble at all, or when they try to use the dribble, they use it too much, right? They're trying to break a guy down or whatever else. Flory took that sort of hard dribble move rim attempt, and that's kind of that sweet spot. That's where you want to see it before the help defense can really get there and adjust. Obviously, Flory was the most athletic big guy on the court. The other thing I wanted to mention real quick, Nick, you were talking about Flory. I thought this was kind of a vintage Bill Self game, if you will, too. Bryson Tiller gets yanked, after, I think missing a rotation or whatever really early. You get Wilder Evers in there, really early. Self, I feel like was pushing some of the buttons that he pushes sometimes to try and get that little bit of extra juice out of the team. And, ultimately, I do think that they were able to show a little bit of that juice. But to your point about the first half, I thought when things maybe started to change a little bit for the better was when they got the back-to-back sort of pick sixes, if you will, when you had the turnover that Flory got and went in for a bucket, and then a guy throws the ball away. Melvin Council runs it down, was really quick in doing it, gets the dunk. Council did some really good things, didn't finish at the rim with his floater super well, especially early, but I think it was a pretty good Melvin Council game outside of that sort of finishing and shooting aspect.
Yeah, I guess, Kevin, we buried the lead a little bit. Yeah, Wilder Evers gets into the game about, 5-6 minutes into the game. He comes in.
Yeah.
Vintage
self move there. Like when you're mad at somebody and you're so mad that you can't just pull somebody out, but you have to put in a walk-on to just kind of rub the point home. Like, I will put in anybody who will do this job, who will rotate correctly and defend. And so that is definitely a Bill Self classic there.
Yeah. And you mentioned Melvin Council, and I would probably agree with you. I think Melvin Council is the guy for KU that he's going to do a lot of things right that aren't going to show up in the box score, right, when it comes from a defensive standpoint and just, being that type of player. And there are going to be games where I think we've actually seen that already this season in just a small sample size. There are going to be games where he has his offensive shot, right, and he's able to be pretty effective with it. And then I think there will be more games like this where he's not quite as effective as an offensive player, but I don't want to downplay still maybe what else he's doing on the floor.
No, I get it though, because he was taking on some of that offensive burden early, wasn't he? I mean, in terms of driving, getting to the rim, and that's great, but you have to finish. I mean, everybody loves shots at the rim because they're high percentage, but floaters aren't necessarily a high percentage all the time. And some of the shots that he was taking weren't necessarily high percentage looks. And so, I'm right there with you in that they really needed somebody to step up offensively. It was good for them to generate points off the defense when they did it there, but ultimately this game changed, like you said earlier in the show, when Flaherty just sort of started taking over. And then even after that, you had some good moments when you put Tiller at the 5 and were able to kind of spread things out a little bit more with a little bit different look. But it took the offense a while to get going into this one. But ultimately, once Flaherty got going, you started to see some different things. I wish Jaden Dawson shot it a little better because I thought he did some really good things. And Jaden Dawson's a guy we've talked about quite a bit on the show. I think he can be a changing player for this team if he's able to be sort of that sixth man who can be your offensive flamethrower a little bit. And he's shown a little bit more than, hey, I'm just a 3-point shooting guy. He had a really nice finish off of a Euro step in this one. He's got more scoring game than I'm going to take 5 threes, and if I make one of them, I had a bad day. If I make 2 of them, I was pretty good. I actually think that there's more there in the offensive tank for him, and it was good to see him be aggressive.
I do have faith that I think the light bulb will come on for Jaden Dawson from that perspective. Like, I don't know that it's going to happen against Duke, right? Or if it's going to happen in the next, couple weeks, but I think eventually he's going to get there, as sort of what you alluded to. Basically, a guy that you can call to off the bench who can just come in and give you an instant offensive boost, right? He seems like, I think he is somebody that is going to get there eventually, right? I like his approach. I kind of like what he brings, just from an attitude standpoint. I think from the times that we've had a chance to talk to him, like I think he's going to get there eventually. Kevin, a guy that I am less confident is going to get there eventually is one Marco Jackson. And I know we've already had this sort of I know we've already sort of had this debate several times, even through the course of just the first 4 games of the season. But man, like I'm starting, my confidence in him figuring it out is wavering a little bit. And Bill Self continues to speak very glowingly about him when you ask him about him in press conferences. But man, it just doesn't seem like he's able to have the game slow down for him. And you hate to use the term broken, but he kind of looks broken. And the sad part is, like, you had his freshman season where obviously it was not quite what people were hoping for. I think he was maybe hyped up a little bit too much coming into his freshman season. It ends up not being that great. And then going into his sophomore year, it sounds like he's starting to figure some things out over the summer. Then the injury misses the whole entire season. But, in the back of my mind, I was thinking maybe for a guy like that, just being able to sit and watch the game, right, from a different perspective would help him in the process of trying to get things to slow down when he's out there. And it just, for whatever reason, it doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon. And that is worrying, especially when you have the whole Darryn Peterson situation, which I want to get to in a minute. But just real quick, your thoughts with Marco Jackson.
Yeah, it's at that point already, Nick, where I think there are times when guys are really struggling and you're looking for sort of any positive to indicate that they're going to pull themselves out, right? And you force it. It's like a bad relationship that you're in and you're kind of like, well, like, she was kind of nice to me today. Like, maybe we've got something still type of deal. And I'm not saying he can't get there, Nick, but I think we're at that point where you're almost like scanning, like looking for any positive to kind of feel like, hey, can the lights turn on? Is there this something that can be rectified? And he did have 2 good plays in the second half, like off the top of my head. Obviously the defensive possession where you get the turnover, where he's pressing the guy in the backcourt. That's a play that, Bill Self will obviously love. He gets the transition play where he does make the good pass out and then winds up getting the dunk as well. But at the same time, those are plays that a guy playing for Kansas should make, right? Like it's not sort of that spectacular thing where you're saying, oh my gosh, this could be what unlocks Elmarko Jackson. And unfortunately, I feel like we're at a point where we're pressing for that. And I wonder if Elmarko's pressing a little bit for that, because the decision-making hasn't always been sound. You've seen him drive into, bad areas and things like that. And I think that's part of the problem, Nick, is if Elmarko was just being quiet, right? If he wasn't scoring a whole lot, but generally speaking, he was making all the right rotations, he was making good decisions, you can be sold on that guy. Like, okay, when he's out there, he's not doing the bad things, but Elmarko has been doing some of the bad things. And I think saying that the game still seems fast for him is a good way to put it. You wonder, hey, is there ever going to be a point in this season where it's going to slow down? And maybe it does. Maybe it slows down for him and he winds up, this is a guy that hasn't played a lot of basketball over the last year. Maybe it does slow down for him and you start seeing those other things. But I think that as it is right now, he's really struggling, and he's really struggling to kind of find his spot and not just do positive things, Nick, but avoid doing negative things as well.
Well, Kevin, I have no doubt that he is pressing because you don't have Darryn Peterson. And now the situation is murkier than ever with Darryn Peterson. So I want to talk a little about that. We are going to talk more about Duke as well coming up later on in the show. But let's get into Darryn Peterson. This gives us an opportunity to take a quick break, though. And before we do that, I got to remind you that calling all Chiefs fans, you could be on the field at the 50-yard line inside GEHA Field for the official coin toss of the Chiefs home game this season. Although after the Broncos game, I guess we'll set that aside. Visit Chiefs.com/GEHA now. Enter for a chance to win to be on the field for a once-in-a-lifetime view of the pregame coin toss. Plus, you can score the exclusive prizes. Enter for a chance to win at Chiefs.com/GEHA. GEHA is a proud partner of the Kansas City Chiefs. We're going to talk Darryn Peterson coming up next.
I'm Brett Goodwin, one of the owners of The Learning Tree. The Learning Tree is a neighborhood toy store in Prairie Village, Kansas. This has been here in this location since 2000s, and my husband Alan and I purchased the store in 2023. Alan and I grew up in families where we've always wanted to have a business together. Alan grew up, for instance, his parents had a jewelry store. I worked in a local toy store here in Prairie Village when I was growing up. When this opportunity happened in 2023, we knew right away we wanted to contact them and pursue the store. We wouldn't have been able to get the store without the team at Emprise Bank. From the day we contacted them, they knew what we needed to do, which was very helpful. I would absolutely recommend the team at Emprise Bank to anyone looking to secure a business. We worked with Emprise from day one. They were extremely helpful. They were always great resources. We talk to them frequently. They know the area. They're very friendly. We know who we're going to talk with, and they know what we need to do. We hope we'll see you at the Learning Tree.
This is the Paid Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer here with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. If you're not already, please go ahead and subscribe on Apple and Spotify on audio, and also on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. You'll want to be subscribed there because that's how you'll know when we go live on Tuesday nights following the Champions Classic. It's going to be a bit of a late one. KU game is slated to tip off at 8 p.m., but I think all college basketball fans recognize that probably means the game will be tipping off at like 8:20 at the earliest with how it normally goes because of the fact that you have an early game before that. So we'll be live probably pretty late on Tuesday night. But hey, if you're up, maybe you're hype after a big KU win and you can't get to bed, come hang out with us. Or maybe you're just really sad after a KU loss, and you can come hang out with us too, and we'll be there. We'll be there to give you a virtual hug and try to make you feel a little bit better. One of the things that could determine whether or not Kansas wins or loses against Duke on Tuesday night is the status of one Darryn Peterson. It's been a bit of a bizarre saga up to this point, and it's crazy to say that because we are literally only 4 games into the season, but here we are. You have the A&M Corpus Christi game last week where he comes out in street clothes, and turns out basically like an hour before the game he's not going to play due to hamstring tightness. And then against Princeton over the weekend, Bill Self comes flat out on Friday afternoon and says, all right, he's not going to play in this game. And we talked about it last week about from the thought process of, hey, you don't need Darryn Peterson to win these types of games against Princeton and against Texas A&M Corpus Christi. So if there's a possibility of him aggravating, the hamstring or cramping or whatever the issue is, then why risk having that happen against an opponent like that versus now it's Duke, and what's his status? Nobody really knows, it would seem. Bill Self has made some contradictory comments about it in various situations. At first it was sort of a day-to-day thing. Then he comes out after the Princeton game and says, not going to happen for the immediate future. Does the immediate future mean tomorrow? Does the immediate future mean not for the Duke game? Not really sure exactly. So it's a bizarre situation that has already taken several twists and turns. And here we are recording this on Monday morning, November 17th, and it's still murkier than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fairness, you and I talked a lot about Jalen Daniels back, I feel like a year ago. And there are certain injuries that you can feel like, okay, this thing is trending in the right direction. And a guy wakes up the next day and it's not. And back injuries are that way. Hamstring injuries are notoriously fickle. And the thing about both of those kinds of injuries, as you know, Nick, is you need to heal those things up before you really put somebody out there, because it can go from bad to worse in a hurry. And so last year we saw Kansas kind of wrap Jalen in bubble wrap, I feel like, during the offseason to make sure that he got to play all last year with a healthy back. He did, but you saw the ensuing struggles, obviously, with rust in particular, because he didn't get all of those reps, the timing, the different things like that. With Darryn Peterson, I'm not saying it's going to cost him the whole season or anything like that. Hamstrings don't usually linger that long, but it is the sort of thing that if it is a legitimate hamstring injury, that it could be a month. It could be the sort of thing where he misses a significant portion of time. And that's not sinister. That's not somebody, he's sitting out for draft stock, which I think is about the silliest thing that I've ever heard. But I do think that when you look at Peterson in particular, and it's funny because a friend of the show, John Langer, asked me, he listens to a bunch of these. He said, at what point do you start to worry about Darryn Peterson? And I just made a real quick comment. I was like, well, when he misses the first big game. Honestly, Nick, it could be the sort of thing where he misses. And I'm saying this with no knowledge of Darryn Peterson's specific injury. I'm just saying with hamstring injuries in general, he could miss Tuesday night's game. He could miss some games, and it still wouldn't be, a serious long-term thing. It could still be the sort of thing where he misses a week or two. And so maybe I answered that a little bit hastily, but obviously for Kansas's chances against Duke and for Kansas's chances against some of the other really good teams that Kansas has to play in this non-conference slate, you'd love to have Darryn Peterson out there, because I think Kansas without Darryn Peterson is obviously a couple notches below what they are with him.
Yeah, I mean, he's the best player in the country, arguably.
Yeah.
Duke is going to be rolling out one of the best players in the country, arguably, on their side as well, that we'll talk about. But yeah, I don't know. I think I think from the outside perspective and sort of looking at it from that area, the frustrating aspect of this is some of Self's comments seemingly being contradictory, seemingly being unclear. And again, as you outlined, that may literally just be the case where it's, hey, on Monday, it's fine. On Tuesday morning, it's not fine. By Tuesday afternoon, it's okay. By Wednesday, it's good. By Wednesday evening, it's bad again. Like that might literally be the case. Like it might literally be as simple as that. It's as you said, the hamstring is probably, again, one of the most difficult injuries to deal with from the standpoint of trying to figure out, is it good? Is it back? Right. And then you get into this discussion of, hey, can he play? And if he plays, how effective will he be? And again, how effective will he be on top of the fact that would you be risking him aggravating it and missing even more time? Right. Yep. Like it kind of comes down to, and it's obviously impossible, right? I mean, we're not doctors, we're just podcast hosts, but if it's a situation where it's, hey, let's say he's, just to put a number on it, like Darryn Peterson is like 70% go, right? It's like, okay, is 70% Darryn Peterson against Duke worth it if it's a possibility that could aggravate it and end up missing like the next like 2 months, like there's so many different factors at play in terms of trying to figure out where he's at and what he's capable of as it pertains to this particular Duke game. It completely changes the aspects, how this game might go, because he's your best player. And without him, suddenly your chances of beating Duke diminish quite significantly, I would think.
Yeah, and you think about Darryn Peterson's game, so much of it is change of pace and wiggle and the things that he can do with the basket. You're depending on your hamstring a lot for all of that. I saw some people make some comments about UConn's Terrace Reed played over the weekend, and they said he's about 80% and has a hamstring, and people brought that up sort of in comparison. Terrace Reed is like a below the rim big guy. Like he's not crossing guys over to get into the paint and exploding off of that thing. And I'm even then I'm saying, you're still probably potentially putting things at risk. A hamstring strain becomes a pulled hamstring really quickly. And it's one of those things where you do kind of have to weigh all of these different factors. But I don't know. Do you watch a lot of NBA at all, Nick?
Not a ton. I vaguely pay attention to it. I've really been a huge NBA guy.
So the NBA now, there aren't really point guards per se. What you have are basically primary creators. And your primary creator is a guy that gets the ball in his hands and creates a mismatch when he does. You think about a guy like Giannis, shoot a guy like Jokic, you put the ball in his hands, and that's when you start to run your offense because of the gravity that those guys get. And so everything that they do in terms of building out that roster is building around those guys, because it's, hey, if they're going to defend Darryn Peterson 101, Darryn Peterson is going to make hay. And if they decide, hey, we're going to pinch this guy over here, we're going to shade this guy here, we're going to help on Darryn Peterson, then you can start to go ahead and pass the ball to other guys. You can run different actions for other people. And I think that's the difficult thing about this Kansas team, Nick, is this Duke team, and we'll talk about them, is really well constructed. Kansas, I feel, is pretty well constructed to play around Darryn Peterson. And so when you have Darryn Peterson's skill set, when you have the gravity that he commands, when he is sort of this quote-unquote jumbo creator, then you can basically play other guys off of him, and you can start to really tap into their skill sets. All of a sudden, lobs become a little bit easier because guys have to help off. Cole Rosario is getting, more open, standing still, feet planted, shots around the arc because of the way guys are defending Darryn Peterson. And so it really is one of those things. It feels like we're harping so much on Darryn Peterson, but the reason is I think this team, the way that they're built to succeed is by playing around him and his unique skill set.
The final thing I'll say about it is, regardless of if he plays against Duke or regardless of, if he doesn't come back and ends up playing later in December or whatever, my thought on this has still been, okay, you know what? You can afford to drop some games in the non-conference if it means that you're going to go out and perform well in conference play and eventually get yourself right. Like I've said it, I think on the show, I'm not going to panic if KU has 3 or 4 losses on the docket in non-conference like that. I'm not going to overreact too strongly to that. I'm especially not going to overreact too strongly to that if indeed Darryn Peterson doesn't play and you lose those games. But I will caveat that by saying, if I know that he's going to be back,
Sure.
That is kind of where you enter into, again, that sort of gray area of when is he going to be back versus, what's his status, all that stuff. So I don't know. We'll table that for now, but we'll take one more quick break, and then let's dive a little bit deeper into Duke, because regardless if Darryn Peterson plays, this is going to be, even if he was playing, or even if he is going to play, I guess we don't really know for sure. Even if he is going to play, this feels like it's a tough matchup for Kansas. So we'll break all that down coming up next.
Hey, NFL fans, what's your favorite touchdown? For me, it's the next one. And that's because with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, every touchdown could bring you closer to cashing in. first touchdown scores to anytime touchdown props, or the thrill of live in-game betting, every snap is loaded with opportunity. And here's the best part. New customers bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets instantly. So your team hitting pay dirt pays out to you. You download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, use code KCSN. That's code KCSN for new customers to turn $5 into $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. Pass-through of per wager tax may apply in Illinois. Must be 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. The bet must win to receive bonus bets which expire in 7 days. Minimum odds required. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, visit dkng.co/audio. Limited time offer.
This is the Peggy Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer along with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. As I've said, we will be live after the KU Duke game on Tuesday evening. No matter when you're listening to this, we'll be live on Tuesday evening after the KU Duke game. So you figure maybe 10:30 p.m., maybe later, I guess, depending on how that game goes. So it's going to be late night for us, and it might be late night for you, but we hope that you'll come join us for that one when KU plays Duke. Let's talk about Duke, Kevin, because they are the number one team in KenPom right now, and they've been off to a really strong start. They are 4-0, obviously. They haven't really been tested too much. They did play an exhibition game at Tennessee and won that one, which was pretty impressive in their exhibition, similarly to Kansas against Louisville. They started the season against Duke. They win that game again, or they started the season against Texas, and they win that game. Since then, they've played 3 teams that are all below 250 in KenPom in Western Carolina, Army, and Indiana State. Actually, I'm sorry. Let me give some credit to Indiana State. Indiana State's listed at only 197 on KenPom. So my apologies to Indiana State. But Western Carolina, Army, and Indiana State have been their next 3 opponents. The scary thing is, Kevin, they've scored 95, 114, 100 points in those games. So the offense clearly can be explosive for Duke. And it starts with Cameron Boozer. You know, the discussion around sort of the best freshman in the country, I think, really sort of specifically revolved around Darryn Peterson and AJ Debansa. Cameron Boozer, similarly to Caleb Wilson of UNC, is firmly probably in that 3rd spot. I think if you were to look at them, you'd say Peterson and Debansa, then Boozer, then probably Caleb Wilson from UNC. Obviously, Kansas saw what Caleb Wilson did. Cameron Boozer, by the way, is coming off of 35-12 against Indiana State in their last game. So he is an incredibly, incredibly dominant player at 6'9". He is going to pose some very, very big issues for Kansas in this game.
Yeah, there are actually some NBA draft people who have him won, and because of his size, the way that he wins with strength, and the fact that he can impact so many different areas of the game because of the kind of rebounder that he is, the fact that he's showing more defensively than I think people thought that he had, and obviously, I mean, the scoring is really high level. Texas kind of hung around with Duke for a while. I think Texas led at half, if I'm remembering that correctly. I know it was like a 5-point game with 9 or 10 minutes left to go, and then Duke kind of pulled away.
Texas led by 1 at halftime.
Yeah, and so when you look at that, Duke's offense kind of started off slow at points in that, Nick. But the thing that's scary about this Duke team, I think, one, they're huge and they're technically bigger in average height than North Carolina was. And obviously Kansas really struggled with North Carolina's size. But the other thing is they've got several guys that can kind of heat up from distance in addition to that stuff. So it's not just, hey, throw a bunch of guys in the paint and try to stop Cam from getting his. Dame Sarr is a guy that KU fans are very familiar with because he was a guy that looked like he was headed to Lawrence and wound up going to Duke instead. Gives them a 6'8" wing who's got some shooting. When you look at Isaiah Evans and the way that he's able to he's able to shoot the ball. He was 4 for 8 against Texas from 3. Caleb Foster is a guy that can heat up quite a bit. And when you look at Foster and Evans kind of being their 1-2, at least in their starting lineup, Foster's 6'5", probably over 200 pounds, really strong guy. Evans is 6'6", and so, and then you're talking about Sarr being 6'8" and being sort of that 3, and Boozer at 6'9", 250 being your 4. That's a lot of size and a team that can really impact you on the glass. They played well defensively, and then to your point, what you said earlier, offensively, they've really given people a lot of trouble so far.
Yeah, rebounding, I think, will be something to keep an eye on.
Yeah,
because of what you outlined with the size that Duke has. And I was going to mention old friend alert, Dame Sarr for Duke. So that's a bit annoying, I think, if you're a KU fan to watch him. And we'll see. I mean, I'm almost expecting him to probably have like 20 points against Kansas. That's just kind of how these things seem to go when you have situations like this, where it's like you had a guy either transfer away from Kansas and then you're playing him again, or in this case, a guy that basically transferred. I mean, it felt like Kansas had him committed. If you followed that recruitment closely back in April, it felt like it was virtually a done deal. And then he ends up going to Duke, and yeah, he's a very, very talented player, and he's a guy that you would love to have on Kansas's roster right now, quite frankly, as well. So that's a bit obviously annoying. Yeah, and then you mentioned Isaiah Evans, who is one of the guys that was really good as a freshman for Duke and actually came back for a sophomore season, and it seems like he's just only gotten even better for them as well. You talk about Caleb Foster, who's again a big guy, is a big physical guard as well. So yeah, this is a lineup that's going to pose a lot of issues, and boy, wouldn't you love to know that you're going to have your 6'6" star guard out there as well for Kansas in the case of Darryn Peterson. We'll see, because right, if he's not able to play, our conversation about Marco Jackson in the previous segment early in the show becomes even more significant, because you're probably going to be relying on Marco Jackson to play quite a bit in that.
Yeah.
If you don't have Darryn Peterson for the game. So that obviously is concerning, because as great as Marco Jackson is athletically, he's 6'1", I think, at best. And then on top of that, obviously we talked about some of his struggles he's had in the game so far this season. So that could be a real matchup problem for Kansas. And, Bill Self, I think I found his comments after the Duke game a bit interesting, because he was basically point blank asked about, the size that UNC had. And he basically was like, well, if you're going to be a smaller guy, you got to be quicker, right? You got to find other ways to win. The question becomes, can Kansas do that with who they have? That will be, I guess, something to watch as well. And then Patrick Ngangwa is their big guy. He was, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, was he committed to K-State, or he was very close to potentially going to K-State, and then he ends up going to Duke? I don't think he ever committed, but K-State was pushing very heavily for him, but he ends up going to Duke, and he's been a stalwart for them as well. I mean, truthfully, this Duke team may have arguably the best starting lineup in the country.
Yeah.
Straight up. Like, I mean, it's that good. When you talk about the sizes they have, which we did, you talk about the fact that you've got Cameron Boozer, who is outstanding, but they have guards that are very dynamic as well and big with Evans and Foster. And then you throw in the X factor of Dame Sarr. Like, this is going to be a tall task for Kansas. Again, regardless of if Darryn Peterson is playing or not, like, even if we knew for a fact Darryn Peterson was going to play, it would still be a situation where, hey, this is going to be a very tough game. I mean, you're talking about a Final Four caliber team. I think if you were to predict, like, the teams that most likely to be in the Final Four, probably you'd say like Duke, Houston, Purdue, I think would be the top 3 teams off the, immediately that you'd say have that chance. And so, yeah, they are that level of team. And this is an opportunity for Kansas to go out, especially if Darryn Peterson is not able to play or is limited. This gives a chance to some of those other guys to go out and take what's there, take what's in front of them, right, against Duke. Yeah. So it's I think that's probably the way you need to look at it if you're Kansas. Not so much of like, oh my gosh, you're playing this like, daunting team with a really strong starting 5, one of the best freshmen in the country, a guy that you almost had on your team. Like, I think you have to look at it from the other lens, which is hey, this is an opportunity, right? Like
For sure.
we have a chance to go out and make a statement here early in the year, and hopefully Kansas views it that way and maybe can do it.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned we mentioned Gungbuzz, like the last guy in that starting lineup. He was the number 5 center in the country in his recruiting class.
Yeah.
The center ranked one spot ahead of him was Flory Badunga. So that could be kind of a fun matchup too. Just like you said, it's an opportunity, and I think you need to look at it like that, whether you have Darryn Peterson or not. That it's not, this isn't going to tell the tale of your season. It's not like we're going to look back at the end and be like, man, that Duke game. Of course, Kansas had certain spots where it looked really good a year ago, and
they beat Duke last year,
including against Duke, right? Like, you beat Duke and you wind up going into March, and I'm not sure people had a whole lot of hope for March and how that was going to turn out. And so we've said all along, this is a team that we expect to grow and get better over the course of the year. And this is part of that process. And so you don't necessarily look at it like, oh, it's Duke, like this is the season on this day. It's, hey, this is an opportunity to go out and show that we're as good as anybody in the country right now, and that our A game can play with anybody in the country. And so I do think that this is a tremendous opportunity, whether you have Peterson or not. Obviously, you like your chances with Peterson quite a bit better than you would without. But at the same time, I do think this is one of several sort of, I guess you'd call them sort of measuring stick games where you're just going to kind of see where you're at this point. And it's worth noting too, Duke's going to get better over the course of the year too. Like, this isn't going to be the end version of this Duke team that KU sees on Tuesday. And so if they're able to go out and have a really strong performance, it doesn't mean that KU is going to beat them in March. It doesn't mean that KU would lose to them in March, but it is a really fun early game. And I'm telling you, Nick, I know you've never been to Madison Square Garden for one of these things, but I wish they'd have Champions Classic at Madison Square Garden, every year. I think it's an incredible atmosphere. It's so much fun, and it's a place that really lends itself to an event like this.
I've only been to New York once, and quite frankly, I hated it initially. Sure. And then it started to grow on me, right? Like, what I'll just say about New York is, like, why is everyone running around? Like, it's just, there's the old adage about the Midwest where people live a slower way of life around here. And I didn't really know how true that was until I went to New York. And I was like, what are these people doing? Why is everyone just rushing around? Like, what is happening? It was crazy. So after I got over the initial shell shock of that, I did end up generally enjoying my time there. And I would like to go back because there's plenty of things I didn't get a chance to do while I was there.
You're a history buff. Like, you got to go and do, like, last time we were there, we saw, I had seen like the Statue of Liberty and a bunch of that stuff, but we went and saw, some of the really sort of older sites that had to do with like the Revolution and early presidencies and things like that. And so we went to Keen's Steakhouse, where they've got all these pipes up on the wall, because back, when it used to be sort of a gentleman's club, and I don't mean what we think of when we think of gentleman's club, but like where guys would go and hang out, and you would keep your pipe there. And so like Babe Ruth, like Teddy Roosevelt, like they kept their pipes there, and then they would go over and they would, smoke their pipe and have some steak and stuff. And so I think with you being such a history buff, you would love that part of New York for sure. Not that this is a history show here on Payheed, but we try to take care of the full picture for
true.
All
I like to think, Kevin, that we are a multicultural podcast.
I agree.
Obviously, we talk about KU, but we can sprinkle in some other knowledge. Now, if you want to know any sort of pop culture knowledge, forget about it. I'm not offering anything. Although I can tell you that whoever the guy on Dates with the Stars recently that everyone loved, he didn't win. So I do know that. There you go.
Man.
That's my pop culture knowledge for you. Real quick, before we wrap up the show here, KU will win this game against Duke if what?
I think one, Darryn Peterson probably has to play, and that's probably everybody watching that is like, yeah, obviously Kevin. But I think that's a big part of it. And I think the other part is, Nick, we've seen guys have to kind of grow in roles without Darryn Peterson here the last few games. And so I think the other part of that is the rest of the team meshes around Darryn Peterson the way that we believe that they can. And that means from a defensive standpoint, getting their rotations down. That was something that, Self said they were soft against North Carolina. And that's one of Bill Self's favorite, sort of catchphrases. I'm not sure there's been a team at Kansas that hasn't been soft at some point, according to Bill Self. But you got to get your rotations correct defensively. I want them to try and force some turnovers defensively. The way that they swarmed Duke defensively a year ago was part of the reason that they won that game, that they really got after them early on, I think, defensively. And the other part is, Fleury's coming off a terrific outing. Where's his confidence level at? Is this a game where you talked about, I think we've talked in the past, like, hey, you'd love to get 13-8 from Fleury every single night. Is this a game where Fleury goes for 20-11? That could be a big difference. Is it a game where Cole Rosario hits 3 threes because of the looks that he's getting off of Darryn Peterson and the way that those guys mesh with all of that? As a second side driver, is Melvin Council getting to the rim and the free throw line? Trey White, is he making his open looks, getting to the free throw line, grabbing extra possessions? And off the bench, guys like Jaden Dawson, Bryson Tiller, what are those guys able to bring? Are they able to make sort of those odd shots here and there, those odd plays here and there that you look back and say, well, this is a big part of the reason that Kansas won this game? And so that was a really long answer, but I think the short answer, Nick, is Darryn Peterson plays and Kansas fits around Darryn Peterson the way we feel like that puzzle can fit.
I think if Darryn Peterson doesn't play, I'll present sort of the other opinion here.
Yeah.
If he doesn't play, I think the path for Kansas at that point is muck up the game. Just make it an ugly fight in a phone booth, just, dog fight type game. And hope you can win it that way, right? Bill Self, I think, he talks a lot about, if you're playing a C game, make your opponent play a C- game, right? Yep. Or if you're not playing an A game, make your opponent play. You can still control making your opponent play worse. And so I think if Darryn Peterson ends up not playing or is very limited in the game, let's say, that to me then becomes, I think, the path for Kansas is to just make it just sort of this scrappy, ugly, muck it up type of game. And then maybe you can lean on some of your quickness and agility to try to outmatch some of what Duke has in terms of size. But that's I think probably what you would need if you envision winning this game without Darryn Peterson, or without Darryn Peterson playing at least a decent sized role, is just go out there and just turn it into a fight in a phone booth, right? Just make it sort of this ugly game, and then you'd have to look at Fleury and say, okay, if Darryn Peterson's not going to play, or he's going to play a minimal role, you're going to be the guy, right? Go out and take care of business against Ngongba and take care of business against the freshman Boozer and prove that you are that level of player, right? I mean, Kansas brought him back, or desperately got him back from potentially going to Auburn, basically for that reason, because they thought that, we believed that he had the chance to take a huge leap and grow into, a legitimate NBA potentially first round pick, right? Here's a game where you can go do that, especially if Darryn Peterson's not playing. So that's probably, I think, the path I would see for Kansas in this game is you would just have to out hustle, outwork, make it dirty. That's probably how you're going to get it done potentially if you don't have Darryn Peterson. If you do have Darryn Peterson, I think a lot of what you said, Kevin, is true, right? Like if he's able to play it and be effective, then yes, hopefully that will open things up for you, especially on the offensive end, and give you a little bit better chance defensively as well against that size. But without him, make it a dirty game. And that's probably what Bill Self's message is, because Bill Self loves those type of games. Like he would probably love for this to be a dirty game, and it's 54-50 with 2 minutes left or whatever it may be against this Duke team. So that's kind of how I think the path is. If Peterson doesn't play. If he does play, hopefully, that'll open some things up for Kansas. But either way, again, I'll just echo what you said earlier in the show, which is, this is not your season, right? Obviously, it's the Champions Classic, and you want to win to prove that you are still sort of at the top of the mountain as a blue blood program. But this isn't your season, right? Like, Duke hasn't gotten you since 2019, I don't think, is the last time Duke beat you. So I don't want to lose, but it wouldn't be the end of the world if it does go that way. So I guess we'll see what happens.
Well, and to your point too, Champions Classic, there have been so many performances, it feels like, over the last 10 years or whatever it is, where teams don't shoot well there, right? Like it's not an unusual thing to watch both teams come out and just clank from distance. And so if you're looking at this game, if you can muddy it up, like you said, and if Duke is shooting 5 for 25 from 3 or something like that, you're in this thing probably with or without Darryn Peterson. If you're rebounding, that's the other part of it too, is you can't just let them get shot after shot after shot. But generally speaking, it would not be a surprise. And the other part is, Nick, when teams have shot the ball really well, or they've had a player shoot the ball really well, they've typically had success. You think about, what was it, the Grayson Allen game that he had, where he just, came out and flamed through, and everybody said, oh, this guy's National Player of the Year. It didn't work out that way. I'm totally blanking on the Kentucky guy's name, who had like a major shooting outing. Maxey. Had a big shooting night too. And so that's the other part, is if you have a guy that comes out and makes 5 of 7, you're putting yourself in a really, really good spot, especially since, like I said, I mean, last year's game obviously was at State Farm. It wasn't at Madison Square Garden. KU shot 5 for 17 from 3. That's 29%. And Nick, they were the better shooting team from the outside. Michigan State went 3 for 24. So it's not unusual, whether it's, hey, you're playing in an NBA arena, you're not used to sight lines, whatever you want to attribute it to. Hey, it's a big game, you're not shooting the ball well, or even just, hey, you're playing other good teams. It's early in the year, your offense isn't fully figured out yet, and the other teams are tall, long, and athletic, because you're playing Duke, Kentucky, Michigan State, and Kansas. For whatever reason, teams often don't shoot super well in those games. And so, like you said, you muck up the game, either Duke doesn't have a good shooting night, or you have somebody have a good shooting night, and you have a chance to be right there, Darryn Peterson or not.
Yeah. And by the way, part of your discussion on the rebounding, that goes back to make it dirty, outwork, out hustle the opponent. Maybe that'll help you with the rebounding as well. So should be a fun game regardless, hopefully. And we're going to be live after the game Tuesday nights after KU and Duke. You can expect us to be live within minutes after the game for our instant reaction to that one. And we hope you'll join us. So for Kevin Flaherty, I'm Nick Springer. Oh, by the way, do you want to make a score prediction? I guess we probably should do that. What's your official prediction here?
I actually kind of like
the show without a prediction. Jeez.
Yeah, I actually kind of like Ken Palm's prediction on this one. It was 78-72. I'll go ahead and go with Duke, say like 78-70 or so. I think it's going to be somewhere around there. I think KU's going to show probably pretty well in a game like this. It's a big game. And I think when you look at, again, how offenses kind of struggle in these games, if you're able to rebound and hold Duke to one shot on each possession, then you're going to give yourself a chance. Ultimately, I do think that Duke has a little more in the tank right now. They've got more experience, certainly, when you look at some of the guys that they brought back, and Foster and Evans, and even though Gongba didn't play a ton last year, he did play enough for them to have a more experienced sort of core in these games and at Duke than than Kansas has. So I think I'll pick Duke, but I do think that Kansas will at least make this thing interesting. How about you?
You know what? Screw it. I'm gonna pick with my heart here. Give me Kansas. Why not?
There you go.
Why not? Just to make things fun, I'll pick Kansas in this one. Like I said, if Darryn Peterson doesn't play or if he's limited, I think it'll just be make it an ugly game. Make it 2 minutes left in the game and it's 64-60 or whatever. I think that's the path. And you know what? Screw it. Give me Kansas. I'll pick Kansas 68-66. Kansas. Give me Kansas.
Okay. There you go.
Because why not?
By the way, Duke in last year's Champions Classic, 4 for 24 from three, 16.7%. And that was with like Knipple and Flag and all of those dudes. So,
let's have them do that again on Tuesday.
That would be ideal, I would think.
All right. Well, there we go. We're going to be live after the game on Tuesday night. It'll be a late one. I hope you'll join us for it. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. That's the best way to make sure that you will be notified when we go live after the game on Tuesday night. And we'll be talking that. We're also be talking KU football later in the week as well, coming off of a bye to take on Iowa State. So lots of things happening. And the best way to stay locked in on everything that's going on is to subscribe. Really appreciate you if you have done so. Thank you so much. And we will talk to you on Tuesday night after KU and Duke. Until next time, he's Kevin Flaherty. I'm Nick Springer. We'll see you after Duke. See ya.